Hey principals, how do you cultivate a diverse educator workforce? Well, today we're going to be discussing that, right? Thinking about your most pressing challenges that education is facing right now, right? We have to recruit, we have to develop and retain diverse teachers. And so research shows that when we have diverse, there's so much benefits for all of our students academically, socially, and of course, emotionally. Yet, despite our, push for this conversation, the gap continues and the student demographics and the teacher demographic remains distinct and significant, right? And so this presentation hopefully really focuses on, evidence-based strategies that districts can implement today to build sustainable systems and pipelines to attract and support and retain our teachers of color. Okay, there's this demographic mismatch that we're starting to see, especially across the country. Half of the public schools students identify as students of color, while white and 1 in 5 teachers identify as educators of color, right? Thinking about this mismatch and how it matters because our students benefit from seeing themselves reflected as educators, right? And so the challenge isn't simply like recruitment, it's can we keep our teachers? Retention. So districts continue losing talented teachers of color at disproportionately rates, causing this kind of gap to persist after year. So we all know that diversity benefits every single student. When we talk to, educators about diversity, we're not just kind of discussing the benefit or the group of students that reflect the population. Research continues to say that all students benefit. Diverse teaching staff contribute to higher academic achievement, increased graduation rates, improving cultural competence, and reduces disciplinary rates. And so thinking about that, diversity, strengthens the educational experience for every child in our schools and really better prepares students for an increasingly diverse world where they're going to see when they're out. Okay, yes, you have leaks in your pipeline, right? Where are the pipeline leaks? To think about this problem and just to solve it, we must understand where our candidates are being lost in the sauce, right? The pipeline breaks down into like these 3 critical points. One, financial barrier, right? The limit to access to higher education. Second, what are the prep programs that can be costly and kind of difficult to navigate to even finish? And third, many educators, enter the under-resourced schools kind of without adequate support. Really, and it leads to early burnout. Addressing this educator diversity requires strengthening all the pieces in this pipeline, not just the hiring stage. Okay, let's talk about the talent development, which is what I love, right? This kind of framework highlights these 3 central buckets, right, of workforce development, right? What do we need to do to attract? How do we prepare? And then how do we keep, right? These 3 stages are, this interconnection of love, I like to call it. So it's recruitment. Efforts alone, we know, will not solve the shortage problem. Our preparation programs are sometimes inadequate, or retention systems are, let's just say they're a little weak. And successful districts invest in all 3 simultaneously, creating this comprehensive approach, which really develops a long-time educator capacity. Okay, I know you've seen many schools have been doing this, right? Grow your own programs. Think of one of the most promising strategies that we are starting to see is this model of grow your own. Rather than kind of searching externally for our talent, many districts are identifying future educators within their communities, right? Think about your high school students, your paraprofessionals, your community members, your parents, right? Thinking of how can we put them in these coursework opportunities and provide financial support and pathways into teaching, right? You have the people in your ecosystem. These candidates are most likely to remain in the district because they already have deep roots in the community. And of course, there's strong community connections. Okay, so now we're in the age of AI and we're also in the age of innovation. So really think about how do we transform our district hiring practices, right? Our traditional practices often have limited candidate pools. Districts that are successful with diversity hire, they've moved from, reactive hiring to really intentional hiring. And so thinking about they recruit earlier in the year, they are building these partnerships with our minority servant institutions or programs and in the institution. And, they're utilizing these diverse committees with these standard evaluation rubrics that meet the needs of the school, right? And so think of these practices reduce biases and it expands access to pretty much high qualified candidates. And I say this all the time, right? How do we shift our exit to insight interviews, right? Thinking of most districts now collect feedbacks from the teachers or educators that already kind of decided to leave. Like they're already gone, they're already out the door, right? There's nothing that you can say to convince them. But by then it's way too late, right? But these insights, interviews are proactive if these conversations are conducted while the teachers are still there, right? And so they help leaders understand kind of what is working at our school, what barriers our teachers are facing, and what support do they need in the moment to stay, right? This kind of shifts and allows districts to kind of solve the problem before they actually become resignations. Now, you know I love educators. I am a big fan of educators. I'm an educator myself, but sometimes I go in these spaces and I see that we don't treat our educators as the experts that they are, right? And so when we think of that too, we think of the compensation matters, but our ESPCT matters too. So educators kind of want to be valued. They're professional, that are experts in the field. They want to influence decision making that kind of falls on things that they will have to implement. Especially teachers of color often bring unique cultural perspective, cultural knowledge, community connections, instructional perspectives that continue to enrich schools. And thinking about the retention and how it improves when sometimes they feel trusted, right? And if they feel respected and empowered to contribute as experts rather than the implementers of whatever we're doing in the schools. So as principals, we need to focus on respect, not just belonging, right? So thinking of organizations now, we're focusing on belonging, but belonging can sometimes intentionally encourage kind of this assimilation, right? And so think of respect as it going much further. Respect means that, educators can bring in their authentic identities, perspectives, experiences to the workplace without kind of feeling the pressure to kind of conform. And, districts that build the cultures of respect and environments where diverse educators do well, and they end up remaining there long term because they feel that they can bring their whole self to the organization. So we're kind of winding down. These are the 4 pillars that I see to educational retention. So it's not the result of, sometimes we think of like, let's do this one single initiative. No, it requires a systematic approach, a train. These 4 pillars kind of consistently emerge in successful districts that you're seeing around the world, right? Comprehensive mentoring, supports, affinity groups, supportive leadership, right? Of course, anti-racist school culture, right? And if you put these together, these systems create conditions where educators feel supported professionally, they're connected socially, and they're valued personally. Okay, you got to check out Minnesota Comprehensive Act. So Minnesota provides this example of kind of what happens when policy, preparation, and retention efforts are aligned, right? This state established clear diversity goals, invested in scholarship with Grow Your Own initiatives, funded mentorship programs designed to retain teachers of color. Their approach truly demonstrates this meaningful change, but it required a coordinated action across multiple levels in the educational system. So make sure you check them out. I say, are you ready to audit your ecosystem? It's time, right? The final kind of thought that I kind of want to leave to you. How do we focus from, this idea to action? Ask yourself these 3 critical questions. Does my workforce reflect our student population? Like who's working as educators, the cafeterias, like all that, right? And then are your hiring practice structured to minimize bias? Do you have the same people on the hiring committees? And, are we gathering meaningful feedback for educators before they leave? I think when we talk about, teacher diversity, it's not recruitment initiatives. It's a systematic approach, right? Districts are making the districts that are making the biggest impact are those who are intentionally building those pathways, creating those supportive structures and cultural initiatives. And that is reflecting their retention. So see this as urgency. The time is now. Recruitment is now. When we do this well, we don't just continue to strengthen our workforce, we improve outcomes for our students that we serve. I hope this helped. If you want to know more, DM me. Talk to you later. Bye.